if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to the readers of 8-Bit Gamer, and then I guess Mia will take it from there.
Sure. Well, my name is Dale Johnson, and as I usually say, I like to make things.
Hmm.
Um, I started a company, Vision Writers Entertainment. It's just basically a home studio. I had been doing just freelance stuff, and now I do. Wanted to do animation, but now I've gotten kind of into gaming. And right now I'm working on a game called Another Star, which should be coming out hopefully later this year.
Was it around October?
That was the planned release date. Some other stuff has come up, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to meet that right now.
Hmm.
Hopefully going to be able to, if the release date does change, hopefully I'll be able to announce something for sure here pretty soon.
That's great. Tell us about Another Star.
Well, Another Star is a minimalistic RPG, I guess is the best way to describe it. It is kind of based on the early NES and Master System era 8-bit RPGs that were popular in Japan at the time. It started out as a Ludum Dare 26 entry, and the theme that for that Ludum Dare jam was minimalism, and different people interpret it different ways. And one of the way it hit me is a lot of people were going for minimalism just in the art style. But if you read about the minimalism movement and kind of what it was setting out to be for architecture, part of the big things behind minimalism was trying to figure out different ways to use the same element for different things. You'd use one element of a design for multiple purposes. I thought that was kind of neat, so I decided to make an RPG using just 256 8x8 pixel tiles. And it ended up taking a lot longer than I thought it would. And it got near the end, and I was running out of time, and I thought, well, I could just kind of hurry this up and it be like the little small RPG I was thinking. Or I can expand on it a little and see how far I can go with just this little amount of art, how big I can make this game feel.
Hmm. Well, that's cool. I know that the minimalism movement is really, really huge, really, really like still huge in Japan, and I think that is the huge element that divides Western RPG and a Japanese RPG. What do you think?
It's hard to say because, especially nowadays, the Western and kind of the Eastern style RPGs, they've begun sharing so much between each other's.
Hmm.
There's obviously still a divide between them in the way the gameplay is. I mean, compare something like Final Fantasy 13 to Diablo 3. They control very differently. They look very differently, but they've obviously been taking design cues from each other. And a series like Final Fantasy, that's more apparent than say Dragon Quest, which has kind of
Yeah.
stayed truer to its roots.
Hmm. Yeah. When I first saw this, it kind of reminded me of Dragon Quest, and I like how you did the small spreading in the corner, like a box style TV when you first turn it on. That's the first thing that caught my attention. That is great. Um, so um, so what made you decide to do? Like I know that it's a minimalist, but why RPG game? What decided to do like SNES console style RPG for your contest?
Well, part of that actually came from there's a minimalist console called the Oozebox,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically it's kind of like an NES. It's just using very cheap components, and it's an open source console. And part of the appeal of that to people is that the room on the in the memory for this system is so small. You've really got to pack things in, so you've only got just a little bit of room for sprites.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually where the 256 tile limit came in because that's actually a little more than you get on the ooze box for most settings.
Ah.
And that kind of appealed to me just reading about it, and I kind of wanted to do something for that console, but I didn't really have the time or the effort to really do it. You'd need a special compiler to it, and you need all the hardware. And even though it's cheap, that's still a time sink. So it was something that was stuck in the back of my mind. And I didn't necessarily want to do an RPG, but I wanted to do something kind of adventure and a
Mm-hmm.
bigger game. Most of the stuff on there is very arcade-like. I wanted to do something bigger. And so when the concept of minimalism came up for the Ludum Dare jam, I kind of found out about it at the last minute. I knew what the Ludum Dare was, but I didn't really follow it, and everybody on Twitter was just kind of exploding about it. It was about to start, and they were very interested in it, and the theme was announced. And I wasn't going to do anything, but the theme kind of stuck with me, and I got to thinking, well, this is kind of an excuse to do that Oozebox-style game that I've been wanting to do. So it kind of grew out of that, and instead of just a plain adventure, I decided I'll go with a full RPG. I've wanted to do an RPG for a while. This was a good excuse to do that.
Oh yeah, I am honestly like excited to play your game. I am like really, really huge a retro hag. So and I grew up with Final Fantasy 1, 3, and Dragon Quest series. So right. I am very excited. So let's go on with the about the project. How many people are involved in this current project right now?
Really, it's just me.
Wow.
Working on it. I'm doing the music and the programming, and so I've done most of the stuff. There's things other people help with. The shader that's used to get the look for the screen is actually an open source shader that was developed for emulators.
Oh, cool.
So that's about the only major piece of programming I haven't done. And of course other people are helping with the testing, and I'll probably try and bring somebody in for when it comes time. I've got to make sure all the typos are fixed. I'll probably bring somebody in other than myself, make sure I've covered everything. Because when you write with your own writing, it's hard to pick out all the typos because you tend to overlook them.
Yeah, I am honestly impressed. You done this like all by yourself. Wow. Okay.
What other tools did you use? Because I know you mentioned an open source program. Were there other things that you used in the development of the game?
Well, besides just the standard tools, Photoshop and stuff like that, the game is programmed in C#. And the engine it runs on, it's a custom-built engine. It's just, and I say engine, but really it's more like just the framework and code that I've used between different projects. And it was originally built on XNA, which was Microsoft's, the thing they were pushing really hard a few years ago, and it was a really, really nice library. And then they decided to kind of trash it and just move on, as they are often want to do. So now it's built on the Mono project, which was kind of it's basically an easy way to get the DirectX and stuff like that, and not DirectX, but OpenGL and things like that, in working with C# on other platforms, which thankfully will let me port to Linux and Mac. Hopefully, I'm hoping to do that at launch, actually.
Okay.
And it's also built on another library called OpenTK. And this library has a lot of tools for OpenGL and OpenAL. So it lets me interface with a lot of different things that saves me the trouble of having to try and port the C++ libraries into here, which is a little bit beyond my understanding.
And how long?
So that's kind of the big things, and then there's just little things. There's the style of the music uses it's a little FM chip called the YM2416. The YM2413, which was a Yamaha chip, was used in the Japanese Master System, their version of it. And somebody had a virtual instrument for that, and that's how I ended up using the music for that. And of course, the shader code and another library for using OGs for the music. So trying not to reinvent the wheel. I have a tendency to want to do that because then you feel, I've made this all by myself. But then, you do that and you'll just be programming for days and days without anything to show for it.
Right. How long have you actually been working on this game for?
This game, let's see, the Ludum Dare 26 was in May. So it would have been around there. Before that, I was working on another game called Junction. That was a 6-month project that I've been working on for 4 years.
Oh.
Wow.
So my projects tend to balloon. This was originally a 2-month project, and now it's going into about 6 months. Thankfully, this one is a lot closer to being done.
And we look forward to that.
So I know that it's coming out in Windows, Mac, and Linux, but will it also be available on iOS and Android? For mobile devices.
I would like it to be, especially if not Android, at least iOS. Android is a little bit harder just because of the hardware, the different hardware. Sometimes it's not always compatible and it's hard to test. But one of the things that's keeping me from that right now is since it's programmed in C#, to port that over, I would need to buy a license for Xamarin stuff. And if the game does well on Mac and Linux and PC and all the computer platforms, I'll probably look at porting it to at least iOS, hopefully Android too, because I know there's a lot of people out there that don't have an iPhone or an iPod that would probably like to enjoy it. Not sure quite how well it would work with touch controls, but I'm sure we probably figure something out.
So, another question: will this be a free-to-play or a pay-to-play game?
It'll be a pay-to-play game. So,
how much would it be?
I do. It would be nice if down the road I can have some DLC for it, and I'm hoping these expansions would be free. But they would probably be minor, but they would be nice little upgrades to it.
All right. Thank you for being with us. A last question. What's the future for Vision Riders?
At this point, it's kind of hard to say. I would like to be. Kind of depends on where this goes. If it doesn't need to do extremely well, I don't need to sell 1 million copies to get by. But I mean, if it does fairly well and I can keep getting some freelance stuff, then I'd like to go back and finish Junction, the game I was working on before this. Finish that and start working on some other games.
That would be great. I'm looking forward to interview you on Junction if the game programming goes well for you.
Thank you. I look forward to it too.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Dale. Thank you very much.
No problem.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for your time.